Madam Deputy Speaker, it is perhaps fortuitous that the Speaker has left and that you have taken the chair, because in your taking of the chair it is demonstrative of one of the successes of this Team Unity administration, that we have now properly constituted this House, and we now have the constitutionally provided for office of a Deputy Speaker. Madam Speaker, it has not been my habit to give statements in this House outside debates on particular bits of legislation that have come. But I thought, given the historic importance of today, that I would rise for a few moments to share my own report, if you will, on this, our second anniversary. The events leading up to this day 2 years ago are well known. It is my hope that in the fullness of time, some person or persons may capture what has happened in terms of a book of some kind, so that we will always have before us and before generations to come a true history of this tumultuous time in our young nation's life. But for me today is really about the fulfillment of a promise that on the campaign trail I would have made to the good people of Nevis 9, which I like to remind my colleagues is the second largest constituency in the country. And the good people there, we told them when we campaigned that if, Madam Deputy Speaker, they invested in us and bestowed that confidence that we were requesting of them, that they would be the beneficiaries of a Team Unity government. 2 years on, our people would naturally ask if we have lived up to that promise. And whilst we hear much chatter out there in the public square about what we have done and what we have not done, the reality is that by any measure, we have delivered for the people of this country. For the good people of Nevis, and number 9 in particular who sent me, they have now benefited, Madam Deputy Speaker, from VAT of food. Indeed, if I may be allowed a moment of levity, I saw some newly pregnant women in Nevis and commented that perhaps we need to put VAT back on food because weight is being gained in the country. But that aside, VAT off food, what does that say? That the people throughout the country have had some relief. This is not a discounted VAT day. This is not a discount on VAT. This is a removal of VAT. And as the honourable member from number 7 and Prime Minister likes to say, he did so with a stroke of the pen. Many said it could not be done, but it was done. And the people of St. Kitts and the people of Nevis have been the beneficiaries. We saw VAT being removed from funeral expenses. Madam Deputy Speaker, oftentimes we don't want to think about it. Indeed, death is not something that any of us want to discuss, but it is a reality. That since the day we are born, we start to die. That is what we are told. And it is an appointment which most of us will have to keep. And so what this government did was to say that, listen, when people are bereaved, when they are at their lowest, that is not the time for a government to tax them. And so we decided that this was something that needed to be attended to, and we did so. And the good people of Nevis and number 9 have been the beneficiaries. We look at the fact that we have removed the VAT from medicine. Our people get sick from time to time. In most household budgets, the cost of medicine is a significant cost. And so again, because as a government we have sought to be people-centered and have put people at the fulcrum of what we are seeking to do in the country, our people have benefited from a removal of VAT. The sugar workers. You may feel as a division, why am I speaking about sugar workers? Well, I was quite pleasantly surprised to know that the $16 million that came to us from our good friends in Venezuela, that there were people in Nevis who benefited from that. And that there were Nevisians who had labored in the sugar industry who had been left out and under the Team Unity administration have now been included. And I say, thank God for that. My good friend, the minister from number 1?
Number 5, sir.
No. Number 1. Indicated, and he showed me the manifesto, that one of the manifesto commitments to the people of Nevis, specifically the young people of Nevis, was an all-weather 400-meter Mondo track. And I'm saying to the young athletes, the young footballers, the young sportsmen and women in Nevis, that through the assistance of the SIDF, we are now delivering on that promise that was laid out in our manifesto, that we will deliver this level of infrastructure for our youth. It's the single largest investment in our youth that we have made in decades on the island of Nevis. These are no small accomplishments. We look at the Fresh Start program and the monies that have been made available for startup businesses, small businesses. And we look at the fact that dozens of young entrepreneurs in Nevis were able to benefit. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are significant achievements for young government. And I say young because we must remember that we're not even halfway through the term, the contract that the people made with us. We're not even halfway. And so the fact that our people in St. Kitts, but also the people in Nevis, including people in my own constituency, were able to access this financing for small businesses says that we are including all, not some, but all the people of the country. That was and is the promise of unity. We look at the SIDF. The SIDF, much talked about, but the public must know that for all the years that we had an SIDF, not one soul from Nevis had ever been afforded the privilege of being involved. Nobody. And we saw the expenditure from the SIDF reflected that. Well, if you're not at the table, you can't eat any of the food. Reflected that. What did Team Unity do? They said, no, Nevis has to be included because we're part of the country. And so the SIDF now has representation from Nevis. And as a consequence of the new philosophy, we see projects being funded in Nevis for the first time. The Honourable Member from number 7 and Prime Minister spoke that over $62 million, $62 million in less than 2 years has been allocated from the SIDF for projects in Nevis. From hospital, to Mondo Track, to Bart Stream, to Van Samry Airport, you name it. We're now seeing the DNA and the fingerprints of the SIDF across the infrastructure landscape in Nevis. And that, again, must be mentioned. I want Hansard to record these things. Because for a long time in the country, the people of Nevis said that we were excluded. And I went to them, and the Honourable Member from number 10, my leader, in the CCM, he went to them. And the CCM team went to them, and we said to them, give us that opportunity to sit at the table, and we will ensure that you are no longer left out of the national development of our state of St. Christopher and Nevis. When we shift quickly, we see scholarships. Our young people in Nevis now, as indeed the young people down in St. Kitts, are going away now at increasing numbers for free, taking up training opportunities all over the world. We have gone out And one of the things I'm very proud of, it may not be talked about much, but as Minister of Foreign Affairs, that has been a central plank of my discussion with foreign diplomats. What can you do for us in terms of training? I'm not going to talk to them about no bus and no car. I want to know about training. Because you get a bus and you drive down the road, the bus mash up, that's it. But if you get a young person educated, trained, and they can come back to make a contribution to their country, it's a lasting impact, not just for that person, but for their family, for their communities, and ultimately for the country. And we see our young people going out. And I continue to encourage them that when these opportunities arise, to grab them with both hands. Madam Deputy Speaker, they may well say I sound like a stuck record, but it's because I believe that these opportunities that when offered, our people should grab them, and I'm encouraging parents to encourage their children to apply and take advantage of these scholarship opportunities. We have them in Morocco, in Mexico, in Switzerland, in New Zealand. We have them all over. Take advantage of these opportunities. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me just move very quickly to a report, if you will, a snapshot of work that has been undertaken in the interest of this country in the area of diplomacy. As a person who has been charged with a lead role in this regard by the Honorable Prime Minister, and who has had a mandate and a directive from the Cabinet to go out into the four corners of the world and make new friends for St. Kitts and Nevis and ensure that our relationships with existing friends are concretized. And we have sought to do that. The nation must remember that 2 years ago, there was considerable turmoil in the diplomatic circles. That St. Kitts and Nevis was being talked about in major capitals in the world in an unfavorable way. That we had lost certain privileges, and the loss of our visa-free access to Canada comes readily to mind. That we had been put on lists, advisory lists, because our young nation had almost been reduced to pariah status in the international community. Trust, as you know, Madam Speaker, once lost, Madam Deputy Speaker, once lost, is difficult to regain. It takes time, it takes effort. And some, when I hear some in the public domain speak, it's as if they think that one could wave a magic wand and all the problems of the past will be poofed away. But we're not in the poofing business in this government. This government is about sober engagement with the rest of the world. And we have, Madam Deputy Speaker, sought to engage with Canada and with the United States, where we met relations at an all-time low to try and rebuild that trust and that confidence. And I believe that we're making good progress in our engagement with those countries. But we have not just sought to rebuild and strengthen relationships with close friends and allies. They've also gone out and said, no, St. Kitts and Nevis must also develop fresh friends, new friends, fresh allies. We must look south sometimes. In Africa, when I visited, they referred to the Caribbean as the African diaspora. And they wondered aloud, why is it the Caribbean does not have a closer relationship with Africa, from whence the majority of our forefathers came? And so whilst many have been fixated on looking north, St. Kitts and Nevis is looking all over the world for new friends and to develop new relationships. And so I'm pleased to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that since I have been afforded the privilege of taking on the role of Foreign Minister, in less than 2 years, St. Kitts and Nevis has consecrated formal diplomatic relations with 13 new countries. 13 in less than 2 years. And our goal is to continue with this trend to ensure that we have relations with countries that share our ideals of freedom, of justice, our ideals of peace and security, and we have been pursuing. So now the people of St. Kitts and Nevis have relations with Belarus, Bolivia, Croatia, Cyprus, the Dominican Republic, Kenya, Kosovo, the Maldives, Mauritius, Mongolia, the Gambia, Saudi Arabia, and Senegal. And we will continue in that vein to ensure that our diplomatic footprint is expanded. We have not stopped there. We have also recognized that it is important for our people to be able to engage with the rest of the world, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is important for you or I, or your children or mine, to be able to travel, not just from Nevis to St. Kitts and vice versa, not just to Antigua and to Montserrat and to Grenada, but also to be able to travel to the four corners of the globe. We do not know where we may end up. We do not know where opportunities may arise for us. The world is constantly shrinking. It's getting smaller. I happen to be reading something recently and was told that there will now be a direct flight from the United Arab Emirates to Panama. Direct, the longest flight in the world. And I am sure that that is a trend that we'll see continuing. So we should not be afraid of it in St. Kitts and Nevis. We should embrace it. And we should face it with confidence, because we are now in a new world and we must play our part in that new world. And so we have gone out and we have said it is important for our people to be able to go wherever their heart desires and to do so visa-free. And so if you're from McKnight and you want to go to Africa, you should be able to present yourself at the borders of that country in Africa. Here's my St. Kitts Nevis passport, and they say, welcome home. You're free to come. I want to make it clear, because there's been, it appears, some confusion, whether real or perceived, that this gives license for people to flood into St. Kitts and Nevis. These visa waiver arrangements that we're making are specifically for holidays. They're not for work. They're not for study. They're not for people seeking to take up residence. They're for people who come to spend a couple of weeks on vacation. And I want to make that clear. I want to make something else clear. That a visa waiver arrangement does not prohibit the Immigration and Border Patrol forces from denying any individual access to your country if that individual poses some type of risk to that country. Those are the normal controls that are in place. And so we have gone out. The best diplomacy, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we can engage in is people-to-people diplomacy. The politicians will come and go. I'm hopeful we're here for a while on this side. But that ultimately is a decision for the people. But we will come and go. The Prime Minister in his wisdom can tomorrow decide, I want a new foreign minister. That is his prerogative. So the reality is that ultimately those of us who are sitting at the various tables and attending the various conferences and the various forums internationally may not be there or may not be there all the time. Since I have been foreign minister, we have had changes up and down the Caribbean. Guyana has changed their foreign minister. Grenada has changed their foreign minister not once but twice. We have had changes in various countries as to who represents the face of that country. But what is lasting? The people-to-people contact. If you, Deputy Speaker, would have studied in Taiwan or in Morocco or wherever, for your 4 years there, you come back and you would have made friends there. You would have made friends there from elsewhere. I went to the University of the West Indies, and I can land in any Caribbean country and have people that I can call. That is what I call people-to-people contact. I ended up with a wife from Grenada. That's the way. That is what you call extreme people-to-people contact. But that is the way it goes. You have an opportunity to interact and engage at various levels with people when you're afforded that opportunity. And that's what we're seeking to do. So travel. There's another aspect to this, and that is that our main industry in St. Kitts and Nevis remains tourism. And part of encouraging tourists to come is to break down the barriers to their entry for purposes of holiday. If I'm a tourist and I'm saying, well, where can I visit? Where can I go to spend my money? And I look and I say, well, for this country, I have to send my passport and my children's passport to some embassy in New York. They may or may not give me the visa. I have to wait until I get that to book my flight. I have to spend money for FedEx, or for some countries, I have to show up in person, as the United States now demands of us to come to Barbados. So if I'm a tourist looking at all that, where am I likely to choose? That or St. Kitts and Nevis, which says you can come for 2 weeks, just show your passport. So these are reciprocal arrangements for the benefit of our people and for the advancement of our people. And I make this final point, that it is our goal in this government to ensure that that document which says Passport of St. Christopher and Nevis becomes the most powerful travel document in the Caribbean. Currently, based on the ratings, Barbados and the Bahamas and Antigua and Barbuda were ahead of us. We have now leapfrogged over Antigua and Barbuda, and we are very close to overtaking Bahamas and Barbados. And while I'm not a soothsayer, Madam Deputy Speaker, what I will say is this, that based on our current trajectory, we will this year have the most powerful passport in the Caribbean. And that for me is important. And if the public out there is wondering how that is achieved, the main indicator that they use is the number of countries that you can travel to without a visa. Some, when we lost visa access to Canada, threw their hands in the air. They say all is lost. We have sought to rekindle and renew our relationship with Canada, to restore confidence with Canada, but we have not just sat back. We have continued to work with other countries, consistent with what I said earlier, of expanding our diplomatic footprint. And so today I'm pleased to say that since taking up the role as Foreign Minister, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis can now travel visa-free to Brazil, to Kosovo, Ukraine, the Maldives, Indonesia, Seychelles, and Bolivia. And just yesterday, our High Commissioner in London signed visa waiver arrangements with the African nation of Sierra Leone. And so we continue on that march to ensuring that more and more and more countries in the world allow our people to access their borders without the burden and the expense and the inconvenience of getting a visa. And more we're saying to the rest of the world, you're welcome to come here to visit and to holiday and to spend money and to invest in St. Christopher and Nevis. I am to report that this trend that we're seeing will continue in the coming weeks, and that, Madam Deputy Speaker, we expect, I believe it is on Tuesday of next week, to sign formal diplomatic relations with Nepal. We're also expecting to engage in formal relations with Thailand, and we're also, Madam Deputy Speaker, looking to execute some additional visa waiver arrangements in the coming weeks. And each one of these that is done improves the standing, the status, and the prestige of our country. And so I want the public to understand, because I've heard the cry out there, well, who want to go to Africa? Too much money to go to Africa. That is not the point. That is not the sole purpose. It's not who want to go to Africa. It's that if you want to go to Africa, you should be able to go without let or hindrance. Because I can't decide for you. You may opt that is where you want to go. And it is a responsibility of the government to make sure that you go there without let or hindrance. And a point that I've been making in various public forums, and I'll make here again, that the critical relevance of all this is that no country, Madam Deputy Speaker, is going to allow you to access their borders without a visa unless that country has confidence in you. And I can't emphasize that enough. No country will allow you to come and just show up at their borders and say, St. Kitts Nevis, and tell you, welcome, unless they have confidence in you. And so, part and parcel of what we're seeking to do is brick by brick rebuild the confidence in St. Kitts and Nevis. And if we can deliver on this to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in expanding our diplomatic horizons and expanding our network of countries with which we enjoy visa-free travel, I believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, that that will go down as another resounding success of this unity administration. And so, Madam Speaker, I thought I would rise, uncharacteristically as it is for me on this type of occasion, to congratulate the Team Unity government and my colleagues who have been working hard, to say to the nation that we have come to this place from different directions. Some were Labour, some were PAM, but maybe they're still PAM. Some are CCM. But we have come and we have coalesced around an idea. And that idea, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that the country is better off with all of our people working together. And that's why we say we are better together. And we have demonstrated in word and in deed that from the advent of a Team Unity government 2 years ago, that all the people of our country have been given an opportunity to participate in and be a part of the building of the nation that is St. Kitts and Nevis. It gives me tremendous pride, and I say so without any water in my mouth, that I can now call up and speak to an ambassador for the country who hails from Bat Village in Nevis. It took Team Unity to make that a reality. I feel overjoyed that I could, after having waited for 3 decades, enjoy a state service of independence in Nevis. 3 decades it took for the people of Nevis to enjoy a state service for their independence. It's St. Kitts Nevis independence, you know. And it took us 30 years and a Team Unity administration for us to enjoy that. For some, this may be mere symbolism. But for those who have been outside, peeping through the window for all these years, and then now, what do you say? At the table? At the table. Whether at the foot or the head, I don't know, but we're at the table. That is what is important. That the idea, the round table, the idea around which people coalesced, and the idea around which parties and individuals coalesced, that, I believe, has been the promise. And 2 years on, it is a matter for our people to look soberly and objectively and determine whether or not we are fulfilling that promise, which is unity. And with those very few words, and following my good friend from number 1, tradition of brevity, I will say thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the opportunity to address this House on such an historic occasion as the 2nd anniversary of the Team Unity administration. May it please you.